Caroline. Caroline will be our lead for that type of stuff, with David as the backup. All right, so why don't we just get started with GPS, a man that needs no introduction.
Kind of. I'm not working for the MRA today, now it's NASAR. So how many people here are NASAR members? How many people here knows what NASAR is? It's a little small group, so we'll quick talk about that. I'll introduce NASAR. NASAR is not what you probably think. NASAR is not a National Association of Search and Rescue Members. It's not a membership association. NASAR is really what it's supposed to be is a higher education organization, basically a SAR university, an academy for search and rescue training. You know, if you want to be a cop, where do you go in your town? Go to the police academy. That's the police academy. You want to go to the fire department? Same thing. You want to be in search and rescue? Where do you go? Exactly. Everybody's got a different standard. Everybody's doing their own things. None of it's repeatable, standard performance everywhere that you go. So we're trying to build that standard, repeatable performance, some way of training everybody. They haven't need something in Colorado. It can be done. So, the National Association for Search and Rescue, yes, we do have members. You can sign up to become a member, which will save you money on a lot of products. But what we're really trying to churn out is a lot of good educational programming. Now, we've had a lot of things like the Search and Rescue Initial Actions course, EMLPI, sort of our standards. But there were a lot of holes in programming, a lot of holes that you were filling locally, and you'd have to struggle to build your own program and maintain it and keep it up to date every time the federal government decided to get this great idea. You know, Good Idea Fairy shows up and builds a new standard, and now you've got to make your materials match that standard. We're trying to take that load off of it. And today, we're going to try and build instructors here so you can now take this course back home, teach that to your people really instantly, and now fix some of the problems that we're all having. I got a chuckle out of seeing Missouri when you had that line on your track going from Missouri to, you know, the islands. I know I have those in my tracks as well. You know, the drone tracks, you know, where you drove from the shack out to where you're going to fly the drone, and there you go. We all do that. Garbage in, garbage out, right? You guys can all be the best GIS techs in the world. If we come back from the field and hand you our 62 CS with a load of garbage in it, every hike that I've ever been on the same track, you're going to hate me. And it's going to take you forever to process it, and take you much, much longer to give us a good product. So let's try and fix that. Everybody's been building their own GPS training that they've been incorporating into NASAR programming. Well, we went and built it for you. So about a year ago, NAPSG and NASAR partnered with a virtual training on US National Grid. It was really well received. So we're like, well, we hit that one out of the park. Let's do it again. So Paul and I started talking, and he introduced me to Jared and Rebecca, and we started working on 2 classes for you, which meet ASTM standards. The 2 numbers are not ringing out in my head right this moment. But we built a basic GPS bolt and an intermediate GPS class, which all meet ASTM standard. One of the nice things that we're going to do for you, we're going to make sure that every 3 years, this is looked at again, revised with whatever the latest GPS units are that are out there, whatever collector apps that are being used, make sure it stays current, make sure this is a program that you can teach to your team anytime that you need it. 2 different classes, one that's a 2-hour bolt that's meant for your conferences like this, or potentially it's going to become an online course, something you'll be able to do over the NASAR Academy online as an online blended learning environment. Or the intermediate class, which is what Jared's going to run you through now, which is supposed to be an 8-hour course to check out knowledge, skills, and abilities on actually being a good data collector for GPS. So I'm going to shut up now and turn it over to the guy who built the course, Jared. We got on the phone once or twice, kind of roughed out an idea, and all of a sudden this great program gets sent to me. We pretty much had no changes other than that we want to make sure that this works with USAR teams too. So that's something that we're working on now, is actually having in the intermediate class, there'll be another bolt-on to that that'll also address iron sights. So take it away, sir.
So an 8-hour course in 20 minutes. Here we go.
Everybody's got their strong cup of coffee.
So you guys are all pretty high level. You know how GPSs work. You don't have them in front of you to go through the menus. So basically what I'm going to do is just kind of walk through the materials I put together. So if you choose to be an instructor, which I think we're going to do a breakout right after this for those who may be interested. So this is kind of our pitch to get instructors. I'm going to show you what comes in the file. Basically, the whole course is set up for you. Just kind of show you the things you may need to tweak a little bit, and then you can go out and start teaching it with NASAR. So the first thing I'm going to do, the Bolt, like you said, is a 2-hour course. So everything that is in the Bolt is also in the intermediate course. So we're just going to quickly run through the slides. I just want to highlight the parts that maybe we'd like to emphasize, show you the sections where you may need to do a little bit of work to do your class, but pretty much it's all set up for you. So as you see, you open it up, I have a little highlighted where you put your name, where you put your affiliation. So it's like, it's built for you already. And as you can see down below, we have notes for the instructor, and then some of those can be taken out and given to the class, and then we have instructor-only notes in there to help you kind of set up the course. And as you said, it meets the ASTM standard. So for the intermediate, it's the ASTM F3072, if you know those numbers. But the learning objectives almost come directly from that. So whatever the ASTM standard says you need to know, that's what we're meeting in these courses. So just run through the objectives. You're gonna, let's go back. Know how the GPS system works as a whole, how to set up your device. We're gonna touch on US National Grid so that we can, the wilderness folks can integrate with USAR. Set up the GPS functions, set it up for field use, how to calibrate it, all those basic things. Also, the ASTM standard puts in definitions that you need to know. So there's a couple pages on actually what is GPS and several other definitions that need to be defined for the course. We go straight into background information. And as you can see down at the bottom, it tells you approximately how many minutes each one of these little short modules is. And I always like to emphasize the why behind the how. So why are we doing this is a good point. And if you're an instructor, it's always good to bring in your own local stories on maybe GPS bad things that have happened with them or good uses. And then we get into the segments. Again, just kind of, I'm going to fly through these really quick just so you guys can get eyes on, see kind of what the materials are, and I'll stop when appropriate. So I also created a bunch of graphics for this, so they're kind of clean and not not copies of copies from a long time ago.
How'd you do that?
Illustrator.
Nice. That's great.
And again, these are wherever I adapted stuff from. There's the original source down there in the bottom. So when somebody says, "Hey, I've seen that before," you say, "Yeah, we have that cited here." This, you can go to the original source, and that's where that's taken from. So if you want to learn more about that, talk about GPS errors, satellite arrangement, and the intermediate course, we go into differential GPS and WAS. That's not in the Bolt. So this is a little bit expanded knowledge for the longer course. Advantages and disadvantages. And then we put in basics of coordinate systems and datums. Again, this is emphasized in the ASTM standards, but we elaborated a little bit more on it. So people actually understood when they're making the changes in their GPS, what are they actually changing it to and why. And Cole, we got some US National Grid in here for you. You'll be excited about that and why it's important, and several examples. And in the examples, I used Mount Whitney. So it works for, it's kind of a place anywhere across the U.S. can look at it. Not very localized, but talk about datums and why they are important. And then we go into US&G review. Again, there's several. So most people who will be taking this course have already been exposed to US National Grid. And so it's not a whole US National Grid course. It's just a refresher for those people who have had it before.
One note on that is what you're going to go through today with Cole. We have virtual training materials that match that. Cole put his own little flavor on it for you guys today to make it match where we are. But that's a free virtual training, including the presentations and recordings that you can use provided by NAPSG for free. So if you need to go deeper than this, those are great resources, and we can make sure that ASAR has access to those.
Then we get into basic GPS functions and settings, and this is kind of the fun part. We know everybody has, especially the wilderness teams, have a bunch of different kinds of GPSs, so that may be a little bit of a challenge as an instructor. People bringing in their own GPSs, you may need to tweak it a little bit, and hopefully you kind of know the local GPSs people use. But the course is based around the Garmin 60 series, and I use the 64 since that's the latest version of that series. Theoretically, it'll be the one that'll be lasting the longest. So we go through the hardware itself, what the functions, all the buttons, and then step through each page and kind of explain what everything is. And also another thing, we talk about installing maps onto the device using either the cards or this is some of you may not be aware of this OpenStreetMap site. You can download free maps onto your Garmin onto an SD card. It's a pretty handy site because it's completely free.
How many people use OpenStreetMap? Yeah. So it's really important in international situations because a lot of times, like the problems we talked about yesterday, you may not have access to their GIS data, even though they might have good data. In the United States, I think it's a good option, but we'll talk about later. You want to have many tools in your tool belt for base maps. A county may have a much more detailed and accurate map than OpenStreetMap. But if all else fails, I think OpenStreetMap's a good fallback. So that'll be important to convey to your instructors or to your students.
One thing to note about this site, it's not always an automatic download. Sometimes you have to click on it and then wait a little bit, and they will email you the file. So if you're in a hurry,
Plan ahead.
Plan ahead. Yes, thank you. Talk about Garmin Basecamp. This is I didn't go into too much detail on this because this is more of a hands-on thing. So as an instructor, you need to be familiar with Basecamp and be able to do live demos with it. I didn't set up any videos or anything for that. I think live demos are better. So as an instructor, you would need to be familiar with Basecamp and how to use it. And then we have some practical group learning GPS exercises. This is where you'd have to go outside. So when you're choosing your location, make sure you have a good place to go outside and walk around. And again, just walking through, I have step-by-step on how to set up every setting you would need within the GPS. And it's broken down into waypoints, tracks, and routes. So the waypoint section, every way to create a waypoint. There is tracks, how to set them up. There's a little bit difference between the 60 and the 62 and 64. For those people that have the older 60 versions, you may need to do a little bit more explanation, but this is designed to show on the 62 and 64s. And again, just routes. Again, I'm just kind of flying through this stuff. This is where you're actually going to have to do some work, the practical scenario-based exercise. So as an instructor, once you pick location, you'll have to set up a GPS course outside for your students to run through. So this is where the actual work on your end will take place. So just be aware there is a little bit of work. And here's where you set up slides for you to put in information. And then data management. Once your students come back in, again, you'll have to do a live demo on Garmin Basecamp to show them how to upload the information and look at it. And then that finishes up that. I just wanted to real quick also run through what else comes in the instructor file you would receive. So if you're sending out you want to get people interested in your course, this is the outline and course description, so you can send this out to local SAR teams, complete course outline and all the objectives that'll be met. It's already set up for you. This is a practical reference, so kind of a cheat sheet. All the information that's in the slides is boiled down into these two pages, I guess 3. So when they're in the field, they can print these off with them and go through it as a little check sheet, make sure that everything's set up correctly. USNG review exercises, so we have just a real simple worksheet for them to work through a couple exercises. Here's the Basecamp cheat sheet. So if you aren't familiar with Basecamp, you can start with this. Shows you how to upload and download tracks, waypoints, and create routes. And then also the exam. So there's a 10-question exam, and there's also the key for it. So that stuff's already set up for you. And also included are the operating manual for the 64 in case you need to reference it, and the ASTM standards in case someone's like, hey, we didn't learn about this, and you can pull out the standard and say, well, it says here, and then go back and reference your slides or that stuff. So as an instructor, this is everything that would come in your file, just a little minimum work that you would have to do on site. And I think with that, if you ready to break out, I guess, Brian, whoever, for instructor, that's all I have to show.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
How do we get it? So you come to the breakout. We will run you through the process of becoming an instructor. Material, if you're already an ASAR instructor, it makes it easy. But once you're spun up as an instructor, you get added to your Dropbox. So we keep all our ASAR material now is up live on a Dropbox. So this way, every time the good idea ferry hits and you just have to change a slide, you get the most recent copy of the program. And whenever there's a change in standards, things like that, you'll go to that Dropbox, download the program, be able to run it. The prerequisites right now there are none. Yeah. So everybody here we sort of figured was a high enough GPS user that you didn't have to run another SAR course to be able to say that you set up a GPS. So you do have to become an instructor for the program. You do have to become an ASAR member. That's the only way that you get access to material. And we need to make sure that all of our instructors are members, so they're keeping track of here's where the new releases are, and here's new programming that's coming out, and hopefully you can become an instructor for more material. But you can teach this to whoever you want. It doesn't have to be ASAR members. The target market for this is law enforcement who don't use GPS at all and get that coordinate called in with the cell phone, of where their subjects are. Believe it or not, I had them actually call a helicopter to go fly out to be a handheld GPS unit to go find somebody. So it was the only GPS that they knew of that they could get quickly. Most expensive handheld GPS unit ever. When I was 15 minutes away, and I could have been there before the helicopter launched. But so law enforcement, USAR teams, as I said, we are going to have an add-on to this that'll talk to iron sites and go through that whole process, as well as ground sergeant.
You said ASAR member, is that is it team affiliate or
individual member? So one of the changes that NASAR has done, that team affiliate thing, you're getting less and less for that team affiliation and more for being an individual member. So we want all of our instructors to be individual members, because if I send that email blast out to your team, 9 times out of 10 it's going to kick back to you because you've got a new president or somebody else who's a training instructor. So we want those people to be individual members so they can track all the changes, things like that. We track what happens on that.
So maybe you guys are going to get into this later, but for research managers or planning sections that are downloading these units, still using DNR GPS, or is that a topic?
So one of the next projects, and we've sort of danced around it yet, is to put together a GIS for SAR management course. So that'll be this is all field data capture. Yes, some upload and download, but that course is going to focus more on how do you now manipulate that data, and now you're layering multiple field units into it. So I think that's going to be the next level course that I'm going to beg to help you with next.
Yeah, I was going to say I set this up for the basic user, not the GIS professional.
Yes.
So once you're an instructor and you teach the class, are you allowed to share the material students who you're teaching, or what are the restrictions on that?
The slides, no, because the last thing we want is somebody to take this material and start running around teaching. The bolt is something that you'll probably see at conferences. You'll probably taught all over the place, and you'll probably see it taught online in the next 6 months to a year, probably. The intermediate, which is this 1 day long course, we really want to keep that run by NASAR instructors, so this way we can manage and maintain the quality of the program, rather than have everybody stealing the program and slapping their own logo on it. Now you'll notice the slides are pretty basic for a reason, so you can add local slides. If you have local policy, we're fine with you adding local policy and procedure to it, because all SAR is local. So if you have local photos, go ahead and add it. If you have local exercises, go ahead and add that for local requirements. But the base, we need to at least teach this so we know it hits that standard. And that standard is something that will carry over from New Jersey to Colorado. So,
Are you going to share our handouts?
Handouts is fine. We don't necessarily want to print the slides out because, believe it or not, we've actually had people reverse engineer all the slides, and now they built their own program. It's been a big problem for NASAR. The little bit of funds that we actually get for teaching these courses, the certificate fees, go towards maintaining the program and keeping things current, which is the big problem with when you try to build your own programs. How do you spend the time?
Yeah. You have to instruct everywhere else.
I prefer the instructor to stay local because then you know the local SAR rules, you know the local lay of the land. I teach all over the country, which is a challenge because I have to understand what the rules are everywhere I go.
That's okay, I'm not expecting people to.
No, we're not expecting you to travel. And I prefer to spin up instructors that are going to teach the team, and they're going to do it as a volunteer just for the cost of the materials. So this way it's something inexpensive for the volunteers.
I guess this is more a question for the entire group, but I know in my SAR, the Gaia GPS and smartphone apps has pretty much replaced GPSs. How many people here use their smartphone instead of a GPS even?
Yeah, we usually strongly recommend against it because in the backcountry, good luck. It's going to last a few hours.
Apple doesn't have a GPS chip that they do it all by calculation with Wi-Fi.
That's not since iPhone 6, I think, or 5. But yeah, I think sounds like a lot of these questions could be a breakout topic, but these are good questions. My thoughts on smartphone versus GPS is smartphones are great, but you have to have all the policies in place for your team to be saying, hey, give me your smartphone, I want to download, or you have to have an email system set up. So it just takes some thought. I still think a course like this, even though it's specific to Garmin, will still be, I personally think it'll still be valuable for that team. What you could probably do is begin to think, okay, so that course goes as a foundation. Maybe you make your own little tutorial for Gaia, and if it's really popular, and it starts to grow. It's just there's so many smartphone apps. To start making a course for each smartphone app would be complicated. I have like 3 on my phone right now. I'm sure between the class, there's probably like 5 or 6 different apps. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, and I think that's one of the challenges I know the thing the USAR teams are having with the collector, right? Is trying to get that app-based product to be able to last the whole day of being in field and collecting data and being functional.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes planning. Bring battery packs. But right now, a lot of the SAR teams have Garmin, so it's good to maybe upgrade their knowledge. Someday, somehow, GPSs may go away or evolve, but they're here. So let's make sure that if something happens tomorrow, we're trained to use them. So that's one of the reasons the NAPSIG working group, even though we advocate for best practices and modern technology and trying to keep up, we accept that right now, GPSs are in a lot of people's backpacks, and they need to know how to use them, and they often don't. And we find that through many, many after-action reviews. So this is a good opportunity, not just for your missing person searches, but if you're going to get involved in a federal disaster, which you may not have a choice, right? Colorado floods, you guys didn't ask for that here. It's just really good to have this baseline training. So those are my thoughts. if you're interested in becoming an instructor, I suggest we break out. We will take a short break and transition to Cole on US National Grid. I don't know how long you're going to take, Bryan, for your breakout. You're not going to miss much. Cole's going